Tyrese Haliburton. Who? Well, if y'all don't know who he is, shame on y'all. Why? Because he balled out for the Pacers and got them to the Eastern Conference Finals this season. That's why. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about Tyrese Haliburton shocking lots of NBA fans and analysts with an epic Game 7 performance for the ages. Tyrese Haliburton in Game 7 played elite basketball for the Pacers and led them to a blowout win on the road against the Knicks in a hostile environment. With this win for the Pacers, they will now have the right to play against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Before I say anything else, though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So, here it is. How shocked were you on the Pacers advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals? Not going to lie to you guys, I'm really shocked that the Indiana Pacers were able to be victorious in the second round of the NBA playoffs. In fact, I thought the Indiana Pacers were not even going to get past the Doc Rivers-led Bucks team, mainly because of the fact that the Pacers have one of the worst defenses in the National Basketball Association. I understand that the Pacers have the best offense in the National Basketball Association, but what usually wins you games in the playoffs? Defense. And you look at the Indiana Pacers defense and you had to say to yourself, wow, they're really not that good on that side of the floor at all. Outside of Myles Turner and Pascal Siakam, they really don't have any good defenders in there whatsoever. But the Pacers are telling everybody that, you know what, defense doesn't matter because we're just going to go ahead and outscore every single opponent, which is essentially what they've done. That's why the Indiana Pacers haven't lost a home game all year in the playoffs. And that's why, even though they've only won 2 road games in the NBA playoffs this year, guess what? They're in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I would say that they have a pretty fair shot to beat the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, do I think they're actually going to go ahead and beat the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals? I have high doubts about that. Not because I don't believe in this Indiana Pacers team, but because of the fact that the Boston Celtics are significantly better than the Indiana Pacers on paper. You look at the talent that Boston has compared to what Indiana has, it's night and day. Obviously, Boston has more talent compared to Indiana, but let's talk about what happened in Game 7, because what the Indiana Pacers were able to do in Game 7 was really impressive. You look at how the Indiana Pacers, they scored 70 points in the first half. They shot 76.3% from the field. They ended up finishing the game shooting 67.1% from the field. In other words, the Indiana Pacers, they shot the basketball really efficiently. Anytime you shoot the basketball over 50%, that's really a good number in general. So for them to hit 67% of their shots, or in other words, 2/3 of their shots, that tells me that they were making a ton of shots and that they're playing efficient basketball. They were also moving the basketball really efficiently as well, because you look at the fact how the Indiana Pacers had 33 assists. They had as many assists as rebounds, and when you have that many assists in a ball game, that tells me that you're moving the basketball really well. And the thing is, with the Indiana Pacers, they didn't just beat them with the greatness of Tyrese Haliburton. Their teammates stepped up as well. They had multiple scorers in double figures. They had almost 7 guys that scored double-digit amount of points, but they ended up having 6 guys that scored in double figures. You look at how Pascal Siakam, he showed up and showed off his championship pedigree. He won a championship with the Raptors many years ago. You could tell that experience came through in Game 7 because Pascal Siakam did a great job scoring the basketball, and he was a solid defender for the Indiana Pacers when he was asked to do so. And then you look at Nesmith. He also chipped in 19 points. He didn't miss a single shot. He was red hot from the field. He was green lighting everything. He didn't miss a single shot in there. And he obviously did a great job scoring the basketball with the ball in his hands. You look at how Myles Turner, he did good work on defense as well. He had 4 blocks and he also had 17 points. He also knocked out a ton of shots. He really couldn't miss, quite frankly. When he missed, it was a rarity to see. And then you look at Nembhard. I believe that's how you say his name. He's one of the guards on the Indiana Pacers. He scored 20 points in this ball game. He played really efficient basketball. He also had 6 assists. And then, of course, you had Tyrese Haliburton, who turned into prime Steph Curry because he couldn't miss from the 3-point line. You look at how Tyrese Haliburton was knocking down everything. He was making his teammates around him better. And quite frankly, Tyrese Haliburton and the Indiana Pacers were able to shock the New York Knicks in terms of what happened in Game 7. I'm not necessarily surprised that the Indiana Pacers won in blowout fashion, although I did not pick the Indiana Pacers to win Game 7 or quite frankly this series. The reason why I'm not overly surprised, though, is because of the fact that the New York Knicks are extremely injured, and we all know that the Indiana Pacers are an incredibly deep team. They might not have a lot of superstars on their team or necessarily even stars, but they have a lot of good basketball players on their team, and they have guys that are willing to play hard for their coach in Rick Carlisle. And speaking of Rick Carlisle, you got to give that guy a lot of credit for the turnaround of the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, Rick Carlisle was a former NBA champion as a head coach for the Dallas Mavericks back in 2011. Then he never won a playoff series after 2011. Now he wins a playoff series not once but twice, and now he's back in the Eastern Conference Finals. So obviously, you got to give Rick Carlisle a lot of credit. And how about TJ McConnell off the bench? The guy was incredible for the Indiana Pacers off the bench. Yeah, he only played 24 minutes. You know what, though? He was still able to put up 12 points and 7 assists. That tells me he was playing really hard for the Indiana Pacers. And when you got guys off the bench that are giving you great effort, that's going to translate into a great victory for you. And that's exactly what happened to the Indiana Pacers. As for the New York Knicks, yeah, you're not going to win a lot of games when your top 5 players are basically banged up or injured. You look how Jaylen Brunson, yeah, he didn't have a great game 7. Guess what, though? He was nursing with a foot injury, but then he ends up injuring his hand in the third quarter. That just kind of told me everything I needed to know about the New York Knicks in terms of how banged up they are. Josh Hart, he's playing game 7 hurt. He ends up fouling out. He did everything he could, but it was pretty clear that Josh Hart was not himself. OG Anunoby, he tried to play through injury. It was pretty clear he was not ready to go, but for whatever reason, the doctors, they decided to clear him up. And even then, he was still able to chip in 5 points in 5 minutes, but it was just clear that OG Anunoby was not himself. He could not move the same way. And honorable mention to Donte DiVincenzo. Man balled out in Game 7. You have to give Donte DiVincenzo a lot of credit for breaking out in Game 7. He made 9 3-pointers and scored 39 points, something I believe he has never done in his NBA career. If somebody told me Donte DiVincenzo would go off for 39 points in Game 7, I probably would have thought the New York Knicks would have blown out the Indiana Pacers. But obviously, that didn't happen because the Indiana Pacers shot 67% from the field. And when you shoot that high of a percentage, you're going to always win. That's just the reality of the situation. How do you win in basketball? Scoring points. If you don't score, you don't win. And obviously, the Indiana Pacers did the opposite of not scoring, because all they did was score the basketball, and they did it damn good as well. They did a great job finding open shots for their teammates and getting the most out of their possessions. And then, of course, you look at how Burks, the guard for the New York Knicks, off the bench, he also had a great performance. He had 26 points off the bench. I don't think he's ever scored that much in an NBA game, but obviously it was not enough for the New York Knicks to even keep the game competitive against the Indiana Pacers, mainly because of the fact, like I said, the Indiana Pacers had multiple guys in double figures, and they obviously shot the lights out of the basketball. They shot over 50% from 3. If a team is shooting over 60% from the field and over 50% from the 3, yeah, you're going to win every single game. And the Indiana Pacers yesterday looked like the 2017 Golden State Warriors in terms of their ball movement and their ability to hit shots like crazy. I mean, they scored 130 points, and it felt like the Indiana Pacers left points on the table because they missed a decent amount of free throws. Had the Indiana Pacers actually knocked down some of their free throws, they probably would have scored even more points, and obviously this would have been an even bigger victory. I mean, when the Indiana Pacers went off in Game 7 in the first quarter, I was like, yeah, this is over. There's no shot the New York Knicks are going to come back in this ball game. But I was thinking, okay, since I picked the New York Knicks to win, I got to hope that the Pacers, they're going to keep missing shots eventually, and that their field goal percentage is going to go down. But it just obviously never happened. They just kept shooting the lights out of the basketball. You got to tip your cap off to the Indiana Pacers. You got to give them a lot of credit for getting the job done. And now they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're playing against a Boston Celtics team where I think they're pretty vulnerable at times. I think the Celtics, they're a good roster, don't get me wrong. They got a lot of good players, but I don't think they're necessarily a well-coached basketball team. And we've seen the Boston Celtics lose games that they shouldn't this year. And obviously, you look at how the Celtics, they can get outshot from 3. I think the Pacers match up better against the Boston Celtics than what people are giving them credit for, because what do the Indiana Pacers do really well? Playing offense and hitting the 3 ball. What do the Boston Celtics struggle defensively? Stopping the 3 ball. And I think the Pacers, they can go ahead and steal a few games against the Boston Celtics, mainly because of the fact that the Celtics don't really guard the 3 ball well at all, and the Indiana Pacers are awesome at shooting the 3 ball. I know on paper the Boston Celtics should be able to win that series, but we all know that at the end of the day, the Boston Celtics, they don't have what it takes to win a championship this year, and I truly believe that the Indiana Pacers are going to make this series longer than what it should be. Now, do I think they're going to win the series? Of course not. The Celtics have the better team. They have the deeper roster. They have a lot of talent. But at the end of the day, I think the Pacers are the better coached basketball team, and coaching matters in the National Basketball Association. I think the Indiana Pacers are going to go ahead and win a couple of games against the Boston Celtics. In fact, I got this series going to 6 games. I think ultimately the Celtics are going to win the series in 6 games, but I think the Pacers are going to make life tough for the Boston Celtics, and I think the Indiana Pacers have to be given a lot of credit for their emergence in this year's NBA playoffs, because not a lot of people had this team going very far in the NBA playoffs, myself included. I didn't think the Indiana Pacers would get past the first round of the NBA playoffs, but obviously they proved me wrong, and then they got past the second round of the NBA playoffs against the New York Knicks, and now look at them. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals, and you have to give Tyrese Haliburton and the Indiana Pacers a ton of credit for their emergence, because what they're doing is really impressive. I love the way how Tyrese Haliburton has been playing for the Pacers. He has elevated his teammates around him. He's been playing efficient basketball, and when your superstar player is playing that brand of basketball, that bodes well for the success of the franchise. On a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how shocked I was on the Pacers advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals, I'm going to have to rate it at a 9. I'm really shocked that the Indiana Pacers were able to get as far as they were in this year's NBA playoffs, mainly because of the fact I did not believe in their defense. But you know what? They found a way to not be the worst defense out there on the basketball court, and they're just going to outscore everybody else. And if you're an offensive guy that doesn't really care about defense, you're going to love this Indiana Pacers roster in general, because they got a ton of guys that can make threes and score the basketball with the ball in their hands. And defensively, they don't really care a whole ton about it, but when they do have to care about defense, they go ahead and lock down the opposing team. You got to give the Indiana Pacers a ton of credit for being able to go on this magical run. It's quite frankly pretty impressive. Ultimately, though, I think the Celtics are going to win the series in 6 games, though, mainly because of the fact that the Celtics are the better team when you compare them to the Indiana Pacers. But you still have to admire the fact that Tyrese Haliburton and the Indiana Pacers were able to shock the New York Knicks in dominating fashion, especially on the road in a hostile environment in Game 7. That was really impressive in my mind. So that is why I was really shocked about the Pacers advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals, as their rise to prominence came out of nowhere. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking, like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That will be for the @Dustin Tran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @Dustin Tran and that Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @Dustin Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel Sports Guy Talking.